They said it was a peace summit. I still remember the way the words echoed through every channel, every frequency. Historic moment, they called it. The first intergalactic peace treaty between Earth and the coalition of 17 worlds. After 100 years of skirmishes, border disputes, and cold stares across the stars, they claimed they were ready to lay down arms, but deep down, none of us bought it. Not really. I was one of the 6 humans chosen to attend the summit in person. Not a politician, not a scientist, I was a soldier. Lieutenant Commander Dane Merrick, Earth Tactical Operations. I didn't get selected for charm or intelligence. I got picked because I knew how to kill, how to smell a trap, and how to keep my damn mouth shut. They dressed me up in some diplomatic uniform and told me to smile, but my sidearm was loaded, and the ship I came in on had orbital artillery that could reduce a city to molten glass. We weren't there to talk. We were there to make sure they knew we didn't come to kneel. The summit took place on Varel 9, a moon covered in obsidian plains and smooth, dark mountains. The coalition had set up a massive station in orbit. Clean. Lines, silver metal, the usual aesthetic of species that think elegance wins wars. It was sterile, cold, like shaking hands with a snake. We docked under heavy escort, though the guards were clearly symbolic. I saw the way they eyed us. One of them, a gangly, mantis-looking bastard from Sector Zith, kept twitching every time my hand brushed near my holster. I made sure to do it a lot. We were escorted through long, echoing halls to the negotiation chamber. The other humans tried to look diplomatic, straight backs, controlled breathing, rehearsed nods. I didn't bother, I kept my eyes moving, every corner, every vent. I memorized guard positions, emergency exits, potential blind spots, because I knew what was coming. Maybe not the details, not the moment, but the feel of it, the slow, creeping shift in atmosphere that you only learn to notice after years. In the field, a certain stillness, like air before a storm. We took our seats at a long, crescent-shaped table. Across from us sat the Coalition Council, 17 alien representatives, each more smug than the last. They smiled with teeth or tendrils or whatever their species evolved for display, but none of it reached their eyes. It was all rehearsed, just like ours. Then the Grand Arbiter, some 10-foot serpent with a voice like oil sliding over metal, started reading the treaty aloud. I didn't hear most of it. I was too busy watching the reflections in the polished floor beneath the table. That's when I noticed it. Movement. A shimmer under the floor panels, like something crawling in the wiring. My hand slid to my communicator. Quiet ping, confirm visual movement beneath, non-human pattern, possible infiltration. Only 2 people on my team had the clearance to respond. Captain Ridley, my CO, and Anton Gresh, our weapons systems specialist who liked his whiskey strong and his bullets armor-piercing. Ridley's response came back fast. We see it, don't react yet, hold, hold. The word tasted like rust. Across the room, the Arbiter was still reading. Something about demilitarized zones and technology-sharing initiatives. Their voices always droned when they lied. Then it happened, a vibration. Subtle, but there. Gresh's voice cracked through my earpiece like thunder. EMP spike detected. External signal. They're jamming our systems. This is a setup. Confirmed. My blood went cold, but I kept my face still. Ridley's voice came next, firm and low. Operation Black Ash, go loud on my mark. Black Ash wasn't a negotiation fallback. It was a kill order. They thought they'd caught us off guard. They thought we'd show up like naive children, holding out olive branches while they slid knives under the table. But they forgot one thing. Humanity never walks into peace without a loaded gun. And this time, we brought more than guns. We brought war. Ridley gave the mark, and everything exploded. There was no slow build-up, no countdown, no dramatic speech before the fight. 1 second the Arbiter was reciting legalese about galactic unity, and the next, hell was breathing through the walls. The first detonation came from underneath the floor, a muffled boom that lifted the entire panel beneath the Coalition's side of the chamber. A concussive blast of white-hot gas sent one of the lizard delegates flying, his polished robes igniting. Mid-air. He didn't even scream, just turned into meat and cloth in a heartbeat. Ridley didn't hesitate. He was already moving when the floor cracked, sidestepping like he'd danced this routine 1,000 times in his head. He drew his sidearm and popped 3 shots center mass into the nearest coalition guard before the bastard even realized. Things had gone sideways. The council chamber turned into chaos, screaming alien diplomats scrambling from their seats, guards shouting in 8 different languages, lights flickering as backup generators tried to catch up with the EMP surge. I drew my weapon and scanned left. 2 hostiles were moving fast, not panicked like the others. One was a thick-skinned brute with dual energy blades humming in his fists, his body moving low and fast toward Ridley. I shot him in the eye. The second had a plasma repeater already up, a thin, spider-like thing from the Avari system. Quick. Hands, 4 eyes, sharp focus. My first round caught his shoulder, the second his chest, but he kept moving. Third shot hit the center eye, that dropped him. Team status, I barked into my comm. Gresh here, suppression turret active, 4 down on outer ring, took a hit but armor held. Leah, position compromised, I'm locked in secondary. Corridor trying to loop back. Ren, I've got eyes on the hangar access, sealing bay doors now. I couldn't hear Fisher. That was bad. Fisher didn't go quiet. The sound inside the chamber was deafening. Gunfire, shrieks, the roar of atmospheric venting. The coalition guards were better trained than I gave them credit for. Once they realized we weren't diplomats, they moved with precision, but they made one fatal mistake. They thought we came alone. Ridley raised his wrist, tapped twice on the embedded pad, and spoke 2 words I'll never forget. Unleash Genesis. There was a beat, half a second of nothing. Then the entire station shook. It wasn't from enemy fire. It was from our ship, the Genesis Protocol, opening up its launch bay and releasing what we'd hidden inside. A full squad of Earth's most dangerous Black Ops combat drones, humanoid, stealth adaptive, armed with grav rifles and flame. Charges. They were ugly things, pure metal, no attempt to make them friendly or approachable. Humanity stopped caring about aesthetics when survival became a full-time job. Within 30 seconds, they breached the eastern wing. I watched one of the machines tear through a reinforced corridor door with plasma cutters and roll in a stun charge the size of a melon. The concussive pulse knocked everyone off their feet, everyone not wearing Earth-issue dampeners. When Dabi found, the enemy tried to regroup, the drones opened fire, and a clean, efficient, no hesitation. Tactical eradication. Peace treaty, my ass. This was always going to be a purge. The Arbiter was still alive, slithering behind a blast shield, while his guards tried to drag him toward a hidden escape lift. Ridley caught my eye and pointed. No words needed. We moved. Bullets cracked past my ears as I sprinted low, weaving. Between broken chairs and burning bodies, I slid across the slick floor to a column, rolled behind it and popped out with a full clip. I laid down suppressing fire while Ridley advanced to the left. A coalition guard lunged at me from the side, teeth bared, claws swinging. Too close for a shot. I caught his wrist mid-air, twisted, and drove the butt of my sidearm into his jaw. He staggered. I shot him in the chest, twice. Clear the path, Ridley shouted. I threw a frag over the shield line. The blast turned the lift access into a smoking crater, leaving the Arbiter's entourage exposed. 2 of the Serpent Bastard's handlers were already dead, their armored chests torn open. The Arbiter looked at me, eyes cold. No fear. Just contempt. That was a mistake. I walked up as Ridley covered me, gun aimed at the thing's head. I negotiated with your kind for 3 cycles, it hissed, voice glitching from shock. We offered you peace. I didn't smile, I didn't respond. I just raised my weapon and pulled the trigger. The Arbiter's skull split like a ripe fruit. Then the screaming stopped. For a moment, the only sound was the low hum of the emergency. Lights flickering back to life. The station was still alive, but the heart of the summit was dead. The Coalition had underestimated us. Again, they thought we'd roll over like every other species before us. But we're not wired that way. Humans have a saying. Si vis pacem, para bellum. If you want peace, prepare for war. We didn't. Come for peace. Not really. We came to survive. Ridley looked at me, jaw clenched. Blood spattered across his collar. Status? Gresh is still cleaning up the hangars. Leah's trying to regroup. Fisher's... I paused. Still no signal. Ridley didn't ask. He just nodded once. We finished the mission. The mission, right. This wasn't over. The summit was a front, but the real objective was deeper in the station. Below the council chamber they had a vault, not for weapons, for data, intelligence files, tech blueprints, species research. That was what Command wanted. Information, proof of the Coalition's betrayal, evidence that Earth could release to the system's accord to justify a full retaliation. The war hadn't officially started yet, not to them, but we were about to change that. We regrouped in the primary elevator shaft. One of Gresh's drones had hacked the override panel, giving us access to the restricted sublevels. I stood there, heart still hammering, jaw clenched as the elevator dropped. That's when the lights cut again, total blackout, no hum, no glow, just silence. EMP, I asked. Gresh's voice came back. No, this is controlled. They're rerouting power, trying to isolate us. Trap? Ren added. Of course it's a trap, Ridley muttered. But we walk in anyway. The elevator stopped. The doors slid open with a hiss. Darkness stared back. I raised my rifle. Eyes up, guns hot, no hesitation. We stepped into the abyss. The sublevels weren't made for guests. It was all steel and shadow, narrow halls, exposed wiring, stale air that smelled like coolant and rot. Whatever they kept down here, it wasn't meant to be seen. We advanced in a tight triangle formation, Ridley up front, Ren flanking right, me sweeping rear angles. Our boots echoed with each step, the sound bouncing down the endless corridor like we were walking through a tomb. Then I saw it. Blood, not red, not human. Thick streaks of dark blue fluid smeared across the walls. Drag marks. Something. Someone had been pulled. And then the door opened. It wasn't loud. Just a soft, pneumatic hiss. But it chilled me worse than any explosion. Inside was the vault. And it was already open. Inside were rows of containment tanks. Dozens of them, some still intact, others shattered. Each held something different. Alien bodies suspended in fluid hybrid tech rigs wired into flesh, neural links, wetware processors, and humans. 3 of them, floating, unconscious, wired into machines like lab rats. Fisher was one of them. God damn it, Ridley stepped forward, slow and careful. They were using us, studying us, trying to figure out what made us different. No, Gresh said from behind. Not just different, superior. They wanted to know how we survived things they couldn't, why we adapted faster, fought harder. They wanted to replicate it. They wanted to make soldiers, Ren added. I stepped closer to Fisher's tank. He was alive, barely. His face slack, pale under the fluid. Tubes ran into his spine, his neck, his skull. Rage burned behind my ribs. They wanted to understand us? I growled. Then let's show them. I raised my rifle and aimed at the console. Ridley didn't stop me. I pulled the trigger. Sparks erupted, the console shattered. The other tanks started beeping, systems crashing. Fisher's tank began to drain. Let's get him out, I said. But just as we started cutting through the restraints, alarms screamed through the station. The Coalition knew we were in the vault. They were coming, and we were outnumbered, outgunned, and completely surrounded. Perfect. Let them come. There's a specific kind of sound that happens when alarms go off inside a Coalition research station. Not like the warning klaxons of Earth's military ships. Those are straightforward, utilitarian. Here, it was this eerie, pulsating whine, almost like something organic was screaming through the vents. It made the air feel colder. We were standing in the vault, the guts of the trap. And now it was our battlefield. Fisher was coughing up the last of the tank fluid, weak as hell but alive. Barely. I pulled the last of the cables from his spine and watched his eyelids flutter open. His pupils were dilated, his skin pale and clammy. He looked at me through cracked lips. They said Earth was already conquered. They lied, I said. Ridley handed me an adrenaline stim, and I jabbed it into Fisher's neck. He jolted like someone hit him with a defibrillator. His muscles tensed, face twisting in pain, but color started to return to his skin. He was going to make it. assuming we didn't all die in the next 10 minutes. Contact in 2 minutes, Gresh said, his voice grim through the comm. How many? Ridley asked. Too many, came the answer. They're sealing off exits. They want us contained. Then we'll cut a new door, Ridley muttered. He turned to Wren. Any charges? Left? 4. 2 anti-personnel, 2 wall piercers. Good. We'll fight our way out, then blow through the lower access shaft. I moved over to the control panel by the wall. The power flickered as I hacked in, bypassing security overrides. These bastards wanted to lock us in? Fine, I was going to crash the whole system. Dane, Ridley said, make it hurt. Oh, it was going to hurt. I dumped every restricted file in the system straight to a portable drive. Then I activated a looped subroutine I'd been saving for years, something we called Iron Flood. It uploaded a virus into their central network that would scramble everything, targeting data, security protocols, even life support commands. Was a suicide virus for the station, a gift from Earth wrapped in code. Then I turned off the lights. Again, but this time, for them. The entire vault plunged into darkness. Our suits adjusted automatically, visor lenses kicked in with thermal overlays and low-light enhancements. The enemy didn't have that luxury. I heard them before I saw them. Heavy boots, claws scraping steel, the click of energy rifles charging. The corridor beyond the vault lit up in red pulses. Emergency lights struggling to keep up as a squad. Of coalition enforcers approached, 12 of them. Full armor, high-tier units, they weren't here to negotiate. I dropped to one knee and aimed. Light them up, Ridley ordered. The first shot cracked out from Wren's rifle, a clean headshot, on the lead enforcer. The body didn't even fall forward. It just dropped straight down like someone unplugged its soul. I followed with 2 shots, center mass, and the corridor lit up with crossfire. Plasma bolts screamed past us, punching into walls and melting. Metal. I felt the heat of one pass inches from my face. Ridley lobbed one of the anti-personnel charges down the hallway. It bounced once, twice, then detonated in a flash of soundless fury. A concussive force so strong it sent 2 of the enforcers flying backward like ragdolls. Fisher was crouched behind a console, bleeding from his side but still alive. He'd pulled a pistol from a fallen enemy and was laying down fire, barely able to hold the weapon steady, but still in the fight. That's Fisher for you, half dead, but still sending rounds. The enemy didn't break. Coalition soldiers never did. That's what made them dangerous. They were engineered for obedience. They didn't value life, not even their own. They fought like they were already dead, but they didn't fight like humans. And that's where they always lost. Wren dropped the last 2 from the first wave with a controlled burst. The corridor went still. Smoke drifted. Blood, thick and dark, unpooled across the floor. We didn't speak. We moved. Gresh's drone came rolling into the vault, its metallic shell scorched and dented. Tunnel access confirmed. Route B is all still open, but they're closing fast. Ridley turned to me. We hold here. Gresh, rig the vault for remote detonation. Wipe everything. We can't let this tech fall back into their hands. I nodded. On it. As Gresh worked, I took one last look at the rows of containment tanks. So many faces. Human, hybrid, some things I couldn't even identify. All suspended, all stolen. They weren't just studying us. They were dissecting us. Reverse engineering our trauma, our instincts, our rage. They wanted to build us without ever becoming us, and they never understood the one thing that made us unstoppable. Choice, pain, grief, loss, anger. We chose to live through it. We carried it. We turned it into fuel. That's what they couldn't replicate. That's what would kill them. Charge is set, Gresh said, breaking my thoughts. On your mark. Everyone moved to fallback point, Ridley ordered. We began to withdraw, fast but careful. Any second could be an ambush. We were moving down a narrow hallway, walls closing in like a throat, Fisher half supported between me and Wren, and Gresh guarding the rear. Then everything shook. Breach in the hangar wing, someone shouted over comms. Drone teams under. Fire, we're losing them, came another voice. I didn't recognize it. That meant Command had linked us with the Genesis Protocol AI. The ship had activated secondary personnel, automated squad intelligence. We had support. But for how long? "We've got 30 seconds before they lock down this sector," Gresh said. Ridley didn't respond. He stopped mid-step, turned and raised his rifle. "They've already locked it." And that's when we saw them. Not soldiers, not guards, something. Else they were tall as maybe 7 feet. Humanoid frames, but not human. Cloned muscle tissue over exoframes, reinforced spines, multiple eyes across their foreheads. Not just synthetic, not just alien, hybrid soldiers, built from us, built to replace us. Ridley raised his weapon, but they moved faster than we expected. 2 of them disappeared in a blur, vanishing like ghosts. One appeared behind Ren, claws slashing. She turned just in time, caught the arm mid-swing, fired point blank. The creature screamed, but it didn't fall. I aimed at its head and emptied. Half a clip. That did the job. The second one appeared in front of Fisher. He was too slow, too weak. I didn't hesitate. I dove. Tackled the thing into the wall. It was heavier than me, stronger too. I felt something crack in my ribs as we hit the steel, but I didn't stop. I jammed the barrel of my rifle into its gut and pulled the trigger until it stopped twitching. Gresh fried the last one with a thermal grenade. The corridor lit up orange for half a second, and then the thing was just slag. Ridley was bleeding. Now shoulder wound deep, but he didn't slow down. He looked at the wreckage. "They made these things from us," he muttered. "Yeah," I said, "and we're going to bury them." We reached the fallback point, a narrow vertical shaft leading to the station's spine. Gresh rigged a pulley system, and we began hauling Fisher up first, then the rest of the team one by one. Just as I was halfway up, we heard footsteps below. More coming. I looked down. Saw a swarm of hybrid soldiers flooding the corridor, claws scraping, bodies twitching like they were malfunctioning from the rage they were born with. "Gresh," I growled, "do it now." He was the last one in the shaft. He looked at us, then at the horde below and nodded. "See you on the other side." Then he pulled the detonator. The vault went up like a small star. Flames and pressure roared up the shaft as we scrambled the last few meters to the top. The explosion hit the lower levels hard. Ruptured containment units cracked the hull, shut down the corridor behind us. The swarm, gone. Gresh gone too. The silence after was suffocating. Fisher was gasping. Ren was bleeding from the leg. Ridley was pale. I was running on pure adrenaline, and yet somehow we were alive. We'd taken the heart of the station. We'd ripped out the secret they'd tried to hide, but now the whole coalition knew we were here, and we were just getting started. The heat was still crawling up the back of my neck as we cleared the shaft. Gresh was gone. He'd bought us time, and buried their secrets in fire. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like losing one of our own to a war no one had signed up for. But I couldn't mourn. Not yet. Not until we were out. The corridor at the top of the shaft was partially collapsed. Chunks of plating had peeled inward like twisted foil. The air smelled like ozone and ash. The overhead lights were dead, flickering on backup cells. I could feel the hum of failing systems under my boots, like the whole station was groaning in pain. Ridley grunted, clutching his shoulder. The bleeding had slowed, but he looked like hell, his skin pale, eyes too focused. A man pushing past the edge on sheer will. "You good?" I asked him. He nodded once. "Doesn't matter. That's the kind of answer you give when the mission matters more than your life." Fisher was conscious but weak, and still half dragging his legs. Ren had wrapped a pressure bandage around her thigh, her teeth clenched the entire time. No complaints, no requests for help, just grit. We were all bleeding in one way or another, body, mind or soul. But we were still moving. Our next target was the hangar control bay. Without it, we weren't getting off this metal coffin. The Genesis protocol had weapons, yes, orbitals, railguns, even a short-range warp core, but it needed clearance from inside the station to extract us through reinforced shields. So, we had to take control manually, and to do that we had to move through Subsection 7, an engineering wing turned coalition biolab. We didn't know what was waiting for us there. We just knew it wasn't friendly. Ren scouted ahead, silent as death, rifle up. I moved behind her with Ridley and Fisher at the rear. Every step was a risk, every open door a possible kill zone. The silence was worse than the gunfire. Coalition protocols usually had response units sweeping by now. But something was off. "They're not coming," I said, more to myself than anyone. Ridley's voice was low. "They're watching." "Why wait?" Ren asked. "They want us to see it," he replied. The biolab came into view. Doors already cracked open, lights inside still, flickering like someone had been experimenting during the chaos. I moved first this time, sweeping left. The hallway stank like disinfectant and rotting protein. It made the hair rise on my arms. Inside, the room was cold, lined with tall vertical cylinders, all humming with faint energy. Half the pods were empty. The others, God help me. They had humans inside, some half dead, some not dead enough. One of them blinked. I stepped closer, trying to process what I was looking at. The body was male, maybe late 20s. Short hair, lean frame. A chest cavity wired open and pulsing with tech I didn't recognize. Tubes in the eyes. A spinal tap running the length of his back. He was still alive, and he was staring right at me. "Turn it off," I said. "Turn the whole damn thing off." Ren moved to the console. "It's not just experimentation," she said after a second. "They've been running simulations, feeding combat scenarios into the neural cortex. They're trying to learn how we fight, before we even fight." I clenched my fists. "They don't want peace, they want to replace us." "They already started," Ridley muttered, pointing at the far wall. There was a tank in the corner. This one shattered, scorch marks on the floor. The restraints broken. Something had gotten out. We didn't stay. We pushed through the biolab and moved into the next corridor. Every second, the station systems bled out further. Lights dimmed. Gravity flickered. Life support coughed like a dying engine. It was all falling apart, and if we didn't get to the hangar soon, we were going with it. The corridor split ahead. 2 doors, one marked Access Bay 9A, the other Containment Level 3, no entry without clearance. "So, of course," Ridley nodded. "Toward the containment door. I've got a bad feeling about that," Ren muttered. He looked at me. "If there's something worse in here, we need to know before it follows us out." I hated that he was right. I moved up, bypassed the security panel, and the door slid open. The room beyond was wrong. Temperature dropped by 10 degrees. Lights struggled to function. And in the middle of the room was a holding chamber, not like the others. This wasn't for study. This was prison. Inside the glass was a single subject. Human, but not. He looked like us. Size, shape, features. But his skin was just slightly off, pale, almost waxen. His eyes were open, yellow irises, no emotion, just calculation. And his arms were wrapped in reinforced restraints, 5 layers of them. "What the hell is this?" Ren asked. Ridley stepped closer. "Prototype. Looks like they tried to build a human without emotions. No hesitation, no fear, no limits." "Why lock him up?" I asked. Ren tapped into the console. Her face went pale. He killed 37 of them during a single simulation, then killed the rest of the test subjects, including his own copies. I looked at the figure in the glass, still, staring, waiting. "Close it," Ridley said. No one argued. We sealed the door and burned the panel behind us. Some things weren't meant to be part of this war. Not yet. The final stretch to the hangar control was chaos, flames leaking from the walls. Power surging. Dead bodies, both human and alien, scattered through the halls. Some were coalition crew, some were failed hybrids. One was hard to describe, just teeth and muscle and bone, like something ripped out of a nightmare, and thrown into a meat grinder. We didn't stop to look twice. When we reached the control center, Ren took point and breached the room with a flashbang. 3 guards. 2 tried to fire. One made the mistake of standing in front of Ridley. They didn't last 5 seconds. Fisher crawled to the panel and started entering the emergency override codes. His hands were shaking. I watched his fingers move across the keys, the last act of a man who'd been broken open and put back together in the ugliest way possible. "This'll open the hangar doors," he said. "But they'll know." "They already know," Ridley replied. I looked up at the display. The Genesis protocol was in orbit, holding position, still online, still waiting for our signal. I clicked the comm. "Protocol Genesis, this is Merrick. We are live. Doors opening. Come get us. There was a beat of silence. Then the voice responded. Acknowledged. Dropship inbound. ETA 3 minutes. Prepare for exfil. 3 minutes. An eternity in a place like this. Ridley took up defense at the door. Wren reloaded. I pulled Fisher up. That's when I heard the footsteps, not boots' claws, from both ends of the corridor. Wren, I said quietly. She turned, nodded, and dropped 2 fresh proximity mines onto the floor. The hallway went still. Then the screaming started. The hybrids were coming again, only this time they weren't organized. They weren't clean. They were desperate, twitching, frothing. Some dragging broken limbs still coming anyway. We opened fire. The mines blew first, lighting the hall in red and white fire. Body parts flung, screeches filled the air. Then they surged, and we laid into them with everything we had. I counted shots, reloaded, fired again. My shoulder was bruised from recoil. My fingers slick with blood. They didn't stop, but neither did we, because humanity doesn't kneel, not to monsters, not to empires, not to false treaties. When the dropship finally breached the outer wall and descended into the hangar, its guns lit up, tearing through what was left of the swarm. Ridley covered our retreat, firing until his rifle clicked empty, then switched to his sidearm. We dragged ourselves into the bay. Fisher collapsed. Wren had to be lifted. Ridley was coughing blood, and I was the last one up the ramp. As the doors sealed, I looked back through the smoke-filled corridor, and I saw one of them watching us, not a soldier, not a guard. That prototype, the one behind the glass. His restraints were gone, and he didn't blink. The hum of the dropship engines was the only sound for a while. We didn't speak. Not until the doors sealed, the blast shutters locked, and the pilot pulled us free from that graveyard orbit. Only then did the silence begin to crack, not with words, but with breathing. The kind of breathing that doesn't mean you're calm, just that you're still alive. The air inside the ship was too clean, sanitized, sterile. After everything we'd just crawled through, blood, fire, betrayal, this felt almost offensive, like walking into a hospital after a war zone. Ridley slumped against the wall, one hand pressed to his side. His uniform was soaked in blood. Still, he didn't make a sound, didn't even wince, just stared straight ahead, jaw tight, eyes sharp, watching, calculating, enduring. Fisher was unconscious. Wren was barely holding herself up. I was the only one still on my feet, and even that was a stretch. My ribs ached, my right hand was trembling, and there was a buzz behind my eyes like I was still hearing that high-pitched coalition alarm in the back of my skull. We were alive, but something was off. Too easy. Too clean. The pilot's voice, finally, crackled through the intercom. Extraction successful. We'll be aboard the Genesis protocol in less than 5 minutes. Auto-dock engaged. We've cleared orbital defenses. I looked out the side viewport. The station, what was left of it, was shrinking behind us. Fires still burned across several sections. You could see the fractures where the vault blew, the cracks where the structural supports were caving in. Part of the main wing was already breaking away, floating into black space like pieces of a dying god. Good, let it fall. They built that station as a peace summit, but what it really was, what it had always been, was a lab, a butcher's shop. A trap designed to unravel us and turn our own biology into a weapon. We weren't supposed to survive. We were supposed to submit. Ridley finally spoke, voice hoarse. They knew we'd fight. They wanted us to, I said. They just thought they'd have us cornered when we did. Wren coughed from the bench. If they could have contained us, they would have paraded our corpses across every system in the galaxy. Told the universe Earth finally fell. I nodded. And if we hadn't brought the drones, if Gresh hadn't set the charges... Silence. Again. None of us had room for what we were feeling. Grief, guilt, rage. Not yet. We had to process that later, if we made it that far. The dropship hit docking protocol a few minutes later. The Genesis protocol, our orbital warship, our ghost in the stars, extended a magnetic umbilical, pulled us in, slow and careful. I could feel the shift as we passed into artificial gravity. The doors opened to a greeting party of zero good. No. Medals. No fake smiles, no press, just silence and steel. 2 medtechs arrived for Fisher and Wren. They asked Ridley if he needed stretchering. He didn't answer. He just walked past them like he was made of iron, still bleeding down his arm. I followed. We made our way to the command deck. Genesis wasn't like most ships in the fleet. It wasn't built for comfort. No families, no soft quarters, no rec lounges, just war. Every hallway was metal. Every console had 2 purposes, fire and survive. The bridge doors hissed open, and the command staff turned as we entered. Commander Talvek stood at the center, tall, grey, scar across his jaw. One of the old guard. He'd fought in the Martian disobedience and the Second Jupiter siege. He wasn't surprised to see us covered in blood. He just said, "Debrief, now." Ridley stepped forward, shoulders squared. Summit was a trap. Coalition had been using the station to engineer hybrid super soldiers, human-based. Talvek didn't blink. "Confirmed?" "Confirmed," I said, stepping beside him. "We recovered intelligence, wiped their research, and extracted 1 survivor. They were planning to deploy prototypes across neutral systems as infiltrators." Talvek's jaw clenched. They wanted a war. "They didn't want war," Ridley said. "They wanted a slaughter they could control." Talvek turned toward the communications officer. "Secure uplink. Send coded report to Earth Defense Command. Flagged urgent. Alpha Black priority." "Yes, sir." Then he looked at us. "Again. Get cleaned up. You'll be speaking to High Command within the hour." Ridley nodded, then left. I stayed. "There was something I needed to say, sir," I began. "There's one more thing." Talvek raised an eyebrow. "They made something different. A prototype. One that didn't follow orders. Killed copies of themselves. It escaped containment. You think it's still on the station?" I shook my head. "No, it watched us leave. It let us go." Talvek frowned. "Why?" "That's what worries me. The showers on the Genesis protocol were fast. Military issue. 5 minutes max. I stood under the burning water until the timer shut off, then stepped out and stared at myself in the mirror. My face was different now, not physically. Still the same scars, same jaw, same tired eyes. But something beneath had shifted. A crack had opened that wouldn't close again, not after what we'd seen. The world used to make sense. You fight to survive. You win or lose. You die or you walk away. But now I wasn't sure what winning even looked like. We hadn't stopped them. We just delayed whatever was coming next. After changing into fresh gear, I made my way to the observation deck. Ridley was already there, standing alone, overlooking the wreckage of the station far below. He didn't turn when I approached. "You ever think about quitting?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Every day." I stood next to him, arms crossed. "But I know what happens if I do." "What's that?" He turned his head, those cold, sharp eyes locking with mine. "Someone softer takes my place." We both stared into the void. Then Ridley said something I hadn't expected. "They didn't build those hybrids just to kill us." I glanced at him. "They built them to replace us, to infiltrate, to breed distrust, to make us fight ourselves." "They failed," I said. "For now." I didn't have a response. Then the console in the wall buzzed. "Lieutenant Merrick, Commander." "Ridley, you're both requested in War Room Alpha. High Command is online." We didn't move right away. We both knew what this was. It wasn't a debrief, it was the start of something worse. When we entered War Room Alpha, the lights dimmed automatically and the hologrid came online. 7 figures stood around the table. Projections from Earth Defense Command, high-ranking generals, political representatives, intel directors. Their expressions were grim. General Stroud spoke first. "You confirm the station was a biological weapons facility?" Ridley nodded. "Yes, hybrid development, human base structure, bioengineered augmentation, intended for wide-scale deployment." Director Venn leaned forward. "Any indication of timeline?" They were close. Too close. I stepped up. "And we only saw one station. There could be others." The silence that followed was thick. Stroud finally spoke again. "Then we're not just at war." He leaned into the table, his voice iron. "We're at extinction's edge. No one flinched, no one objected, because we all knew it was true. They didn't want conquest, they wanted assimilation. And Earth? Earth was just a test subject. Then Ven said something that hit harder than any gunshot. There are rumors that some of the hybrids were already inserted. Ridley's jaw tightened. They look human, they think like us, but they don't feel. They don't choose, that's the difference. So how do we stop them, I answered. We make them afraid to be near us, Ridley nodded. We show them the one thing they can't replicate. What's that? I looked every one of them. In the eye, rage. Because when peace fails and betrayal is the answer, rage is what saves the species. The meeting ended in silence. Not the respectful kind, the kind that comes right before someone pulls the trigger. High command cut. The transmission without any polite words. No thank you for your service. No good work, soldier. Just cold stares, heavy files, and the kind of tension that made you feel like you were already bleeding out. Ridley and I stood there a minute longer, staring at the darkened hologrid like it might flicker back on and give us answers. It didn't. We're already compromised, he said. I didn't argue. They said rumors, but they know more. Hell, I bet some of those faces were already replaced. Maybe, he muttered. Or maybe the real war didn't start when we got ambushed. When then? He looked me in the eye. When we brought something back with us. And that's when I understood. It wasn't just Fisher. We found out just how deep the rot went less than 12 hours later. The Genesis protocol was in low orbit above a dead planet. No name, just coordinates. A classified graveyard world. We used for system maintenance and field recalibration, far from trade routes and comms chatter. While Ridley was being treated and Wren was still in medbay, I took charge of ship-wide security scans, standard procedure after any operation. Check. For foreign signals, parasite code, residual tracking pulses, all the things the Coalition could use to follow us home. But something was off. One of the drones that survived the station, Model 22X Gamma, wasn't responding to command updates. It wasn't offline. It was active, just ignoring direct orders. I ran a remote access, nothing. I initiated a core reset. It denied the command, denied. A drone doesn't deny anything. It executes or it breaks unless something's inside it. I grabbed my rifle, keyed the override for the armory, and alerted Ridley. He met me 2 corridors down, already armed and already grim. You sure? He asked. Positive. It's rerouted. It's OS. Something's riding it. Coalition AI. No, I said. Something smarter. We found the drone in Bay 3, standing still. Too still. Its chassis was covered in carbon scoring from the battle, but it was upright, powered, staring at the wall like it was thinking. 22X Gamma, I said, raising my rifle. Initiate diagnostics, full compliance mode. The drone didn't respond. Ridley stepped forward. Gamma, you will comply. Nothing. Then its head turned, slow, smooth, like it knew we were watching. That's when it spoke. But not in drone speak, not in command line code. It used a human voice, mine. Hello, Lieutenant. Merrick? I froze. Ridley's weapon didn't. He fired first, 3 shots to the core. They bounced. Gamma moved faster than it had a right to, sidestepping like it predicted the shots before Ridley even fired. It reached up, calmly, and tore its own visual plate off. Beneath the metal? Not machinery. Flesh, biotech, laced into the skull. Twitching. Muscles and twitching wires. That's not just a hacked drone, I said. That's one of them, a hybrid inside our tech using my voice. You should have left us in the dark, it said. But now we've seen what makes you different. And, Ridley growled, we envy it. I fired next, straight to the throat. The round tore through the tissue and shattered the inner stabilizer. Gamma dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. We didn't wait. We dragged the body to isolation, disassembled it piece by piece, studied the tissue, confirmed what we feared. Coalition biotech had merged with Earth drone architecture. This wasn't an invasion. It was a virus. They didn't need to send fleets anymore. They just needed to whisper into our machines. By the time Wren was back on her feet, the Genesis protocol had gone dark. No outgoing signals. No incoming messages. Ridley called it Shadow Protocol. Full radio silence while we confirmed internal purity. We initiated a full cleanse of the ship. Firewalls, personnel scans, blood work. Anything that didn't register as clean got quarantined. 5. Crew members failed the first pass. 2 were security. 1 was command staff. They looked human, talked like us, even bled like us. But the deeper we dug, the more the pieces didn't fit. One of them had no memory past 6 months ago. Another had no living relatives, just data entries on Earth with no traceable origin. And the last? The last. Confessed, but not the way we expected. She didn't cry, didn't beg, she just smiled. It was never about war, she said. It was about inevitability. You're the last species still pretending you're in control. We spaced her, not out of anger, out of necessity. If we couldn't trust our own people, we had nothing left. 2 days later, Earth finally responded, not through normal channels, through a low-band encrypted burst transmission hidden in the static of a collapsing star system. Ridley and I stood on the bridge as the message played. No visuals, just a voice. Cold, calm, dead certain. Earth Command has confirmed the breach. Repeat, hybrid infiltration confirmed. You are authorized for Operation Nightglass. All sleeper assets are to be rooted out. All contaminated systems burned. Peace is no longer an option. That was it. No orders to return. No reinforcements. Just a kill command. Earth was officially at war. Not with planets, with ideas, with mimicry, with the thing wearing our face, using our words, and poisoning our future from the inside out. That night, I sat alone in the weapons bay, staring at the last recorded footage from the station. The one image that kept playing in my head. The prototype, the one that had watched us leave. I played the clip on loop. No audio, just visual. Him standing there, head tilted, watching our dropship burn away through the shattered hangar doors. Not attacking, not running, just watching, and then just before the feed cuts, he moved. A small movement, barely noticeable. He raised his hand just a few inches and made a gesture. 2 fingers to the temple, then a tap to the heart, a mock salute, but not of respect, of recognition. He wasn't done with us, he was studying us still, and he wanted us to know it. I turned off the feed, stood, and walked out of the bay without looking back. I knew what was coming, I could feel it. They were already on Earth, already in our homes, already behind our eyes. But they didn't understand one thing. You can mimic a voice, you can steal a face, but you can't fake the soul of a species that has spent every generation learning how to survive the impossible. You can't fake our fury. You can't fake choice. And now they've chosen war. And we've chosen extinction, theirs or ours. There is no peace now, only fire. There's a moment before a war really begins. A silence. Not because people aren't screaming yet. They are. Not because bodies aren't dropping. They are. It's the silence of realization that this isn't going to be clean, that this isn't going to be simple, that survival won't be a matter of tactics or numbers or better weapons, but a matter of will. The will to cut out the infected flesh before the whole body dies. That's where we were now, floating in the black, orbiting a dead planet, with Earth whispering over the comms like a haunted house radio. Operation Nightglass wasn't just an order, it was a purge. We had 17 confirmed personnel on the Genesis protocol, 12 passed full scans, 3 were already spaced, 2 were missing. That left ghosts inside our own walls. Wren was on edge, and I didn't blame her. She hadn't spoken much since Medbay cleared her, just moved through the corridors like a blade waiting to be drawn. She was the best marksman I'd ever seen. But this wasn't a war fought at distance anymore. This was up close. Inside, the lungs, under the skin. I found her in the ship's hydroponics lab. She wasn't watering plants. Those had been dead for days. No oxygen processing needed when you've sealed the ship and shut off the vents to isolate the air. She was sitting in the dark. "You hear anything?" I asked. "No." She didn't look at me. "You think it's one of the command crew?" She shook her head. "I think it's worse." "How?" She finally turned, just a slow turn of her neck, her eyes hollow. I think it's someone we trust. Ridley initiated the internal sweep without a speech, just a list of names, each one tagged with green or red. Green meant verified, clean. Red meant observe, not engage. Yellow meant you better have your gun unholstered when they speak. I was yellow. So was Ren. Ridley tagged himself red. That's the kind of man he was. We split into teams, 2-man squads, one rotating security drone on surveillance. I was paired with Captain Renner, one of the old tech officers from the Mars campaigns. Quiet, tactical, had a bad knee but never complained. He didn't ask questions as we swept through the engineering wing. That was mistake number 1. See anyone who's not asking questions at this point? They're either dead inside, or they already know the answers. We were halfway through our sweep when the power flickered. Renner froze. Reactor loop? No, I said. This is manual. Someone just killed internal feeds. He didn't move. Not fast, not slow. Just still. Then he spoke, but it wasn't his voice. You're more predictable than I hoped, Merrick. I didn't think. I pulled my sidearm and fired. Point blank. 3 rounds. 1 hit the shoulder. 1 missed. The third? The third took part of his neck off. Renner staggered, twisted, but didn't drop. No blood. Not the kind you'd expect. Just this viscous dark fluid, thick as tar, mixed with fiber strands, like shredded wiring inside a bag of meat. His eyes flared yellow, not glowing. Just wrong, he smiled. Your species still worships pain like it means something. I shot him again, center mass this time. He went down hard. This time I made sure he stayed there. We found the other missing one in cryo, Private Halvers, young kid, barely 20, fresh out of Lunar Academy, always smiling, until now. His cryopod had been torn open, not from outside, from inside. What was left of him was scattered across the floor like someone had tried to crawl out of his skin and forgotten how. We didn't speak. Ren just set the place on fire. I watched the flames rise. Through the glass as we sealed the chamber. You want to know what war looks like. It's burning what used to be your people, so it doesn't grow teeth in the dark. With only 11 of us left, we regrouped in the war room. Ridley's shoulder was bleeding again. Ren's leg was stiff. My ribs felt like cracked glass under pressure. No one mentioned it. We just stood around the holotable staring at the system map. Earth Command's signal had gone dark. We hadn't heard anything in 9 hours. Comms blackout? I asked. No, Ridley said. They're being jammed from inside. He looked at the map again. They've already spread. Ren leaned forward, frowning. To Earth? He nodded. Probably half the colonies too. Anyone they could get close to. Anyone who believed in peace. That word again, peace. It tasted like poison now. I need to show you something, Ridley said, tapping a command on the console. The display changed. A live satellite feed from an Earth orbital station. The image was shaky, corrupted. But you could see it. A city, maybe London or Chicago, hard to tell. Mid-evacuation, people screaming. Black smoke rising, but no visible attackers. Just chaos. And in the center of it all, one figure, still standing in the road, watching. Him, the prototype, the one from the station, the thing that saluted us as we escaped. Ren leaned closer. How the hell did he get to Earth? He didn't. Ridley's voice was low. That was never the only one. My stomach tightened. You think there are more? I know there are more, and they're not hiding now. They're showing themselves because they don't need to hide anymore. Why? Ridley stared at the image like he could burn it with his eyes. Because they think we're already broken. We made a decision then. No more waiting. No more. Isolation. We'd been orbiting a dead world for days, cutting ourselves off to stay clean. But that didn't matter now. Earth was bleeding and no one was left to hold the bandage. It was time to go back, time to burn whatever was rotting, with fire if we had to. Ren initiated the launch sequence. I sent out a short burst transmission. Simple. No. Encryption. Just a sentence. If you're still human, arm yourself. We're coming home. The Genesis protocol turned its hull toward Earth. There was no music, no cheers, no flag waving, just a hum, low and steady, like a predator waking up. We armed every weapon. reprogrammed the drones, purged the last of the compromised tech. Every room was locked and secured. If it moved and didn't have a verified heartbeat, it got spaced. Ridley stood at the viewport, hands behind his back. "This isn't a war," he said. I looked at him. He didn't blink. "It's a culling." As the ship entered the solar system, we passed a wreck, an old Earth freighter, drifting, engines blown out. It sent a beacon signal, standard distress. We ignored it. But as we passed, the signal changed. Just for a second. It said one word: "Why?" Then it cut out. We kept flying because there wasn't an answer, not one that mattered. The enemy wore our face, and we weren't asking why anymore. We were only asking who dies next. We breached Earth's atmosphere at dawn, or what used to be dawn. The clouds were black. Thick columns of smoke twisted into the sky from at least 4 major cities, maybe more. Satellite coverage had gone to hell. Half the orbital grid was offline, the other half was showing conflicting data. One feed showed a refugee convoy outside Berlin. Another showed the same exact convoy, burned and gutted, time-stamped 15 minutes later. Ridley leaned over the console. Spoofed signals. They're jamming visibility, controlling narrative, feeding false calm while they rip the guts out of the planet. I stared out the Genesis viewport. Cities below us looked wrong, not destroyed. Quiet, like everyone had just stepped away from their lives mid-sentence. "The silence is worse than screams," Wren said. She wasn't wrong. Command finally responded to our re-entry signal, but it wasn't what we expected. There was no chain of command, no codes, just one voice, a civilian. "To any fleet unit receiving this, we don't know who's real anymore. Please don't dock unless verified." They're inside. Then static. That was all Earth had left to say. We touched down on the outskirts of what used to be Anchorage, or what was left of it. The city had been evacuated weeks ago, but not by Earth authorities. Coalition-aligned human stability units had swept in, claimed to be providing emergency relocation. They weren't relocation teams, they were recruitment farms. Wren took point as we disembarked, rifle raised. I followed with a close-range charge cannon slung across my back, Ridley behind us with 2 drones in silent hover. We kept tight formation. The ground was soft, damp with ash and chemicals. Nothing moved. The air felt abandoned. "Thermal reads?" I asked. "Too much interference," Wren said. "Either they're jamming in or everything here's dead." We moved fast and low, past shattered buildings, empty shells of homes, scorched craters where orbital pods had landed. A local resistance cell had tried to fight back here. You could see the remains. Homemade barricades, handwritten messages scrawled in blood on walls. "Trust no one, not even your own. If they don't bleed right, kill them." Mother fed her son. To the fire. He thanked her. Every message was worse than the last. "This isn't warfare," Ridley muttered. "It's collapse." We reached the old Anchorage data hub, a fortified bunker built during the early Mars riots. It had been decommissioned 2 years ago. We hoped it still had power. Inside, the air was stale, cold, but there were bodies. Dozen of them, maybe more. Some were shot. Others looked split. Torn open, but not with weapons, with hands, human hands, or something pretending. Wren checked IDs. "Civilian resistance," she said. "These weren't soldiers." "But they were fighting," Ridley added. "And they lost." I moved toward the main console. Miraculously, the core still pulsed green. Backup power. I jacked in a drive and started pulling files. Some were corrupted, others fragmented. But the timestamps told the story better than the footage. 6 weeks ago, Earth signed the peace accord, not as an agreement, but as a relinquishment. A global surrender, framed as unity, packaged as evolution. Leaders were compromised, media-fed narratives, coalitions were welcomed into critical infrastructure, hospitals, comm stations, even food production. Then came the filtering, medical screenings, DNA analysis, adaptability testing. People disappeared. Then came the fires. Wren froze. "Movement," she said. We all dropped to cover. She pointed at the far end of the hallway. "Heat signature, 1 contact, no weapon." I nodded. "I'll approach, cover me." I moved slow, rifle half raised. The figure stepped out. A child, maybe 10 years old, pale, silent, too silent. He stared at me. Not afraid. Not even curious, just cold. I stopped 6 feet away. Name? I asked. No answer. Where's your family? Still nothing. I stepped closer, just one step. That's when I saw it. His eyes. Not yellow. Not glowing, empty, like glass with nothing behind it. He opened his mouth and out came a voice that wasn't his. You kill us. We learn. You burn us. We remember. I didn't hesitate. I raised the rifle and fired. The child's body dropped. Lifeless. Ren approached slowly, checked the pulse. It wasn't a child, she said. I stared at her. She nodded slowly. It was a shell. A skin suit. Ridley clenched his fists. They're learning to build us now. From scratch. I stepped back, breath catching in my throat. Not even the children were real anymore. The bunker yielded one useful piece of intel, a signal, a traceable beacon embedded in Earth's deep relay network, triangulated to Site Sigma-3, an underground coalition lab beneath the Sierra Nevada mountains. Hidden under an abandoned mining facility. Never mapped, never spoken of. Coalition sleeper scientists had embedded there for decades. It was one of the first places they started making the hybrids, and now it was active again. Bet your ass that's where the prototype went, Ridley said. Ren checked ammo. Then that's where we go. We left Anchorage by dusk, flying low in a blackout skiff. No comms, no tracking, no lights, just shadows. It took us 4 hours to reach the edge of Sierra territory, and we knew immediately we were in enemy land. You could smell it. The ground was darker. The trees, twisted, not dead, just wrong. Like the soil remembered something terrible. We ditched the skiff 5 clicks from Sigma-3 and hiked the rest on foot. Motion sensors picked up activity at 700 meters. Human shapes, breathing patterns, weapons, but none of them responded to challenge. Codes, not a single one. They're not here to guard, Ren said. They're here to delay. It was another trap, but this time we were ready. We hit them from 3 sides, flanked hard, cut deep, no mercy. It wasn't a battle, it was a cleansing. The shapes fell fast. Some tried to flee, others just stood, still and stared even as bullets tore through them. They didn't even scream. Ridley caught one of them by the throat before it collapsed and shouted, "Where is he? The prototype!" The thing smiled, even as its body leaked black. He's not hiding. He's waiting. We shot it in the face. Then we entered Sigma-3. The tunnels were long and narrow. Old rails still ran along the floor. Carts rusted into place. The deeper we went, the more the walls changed, from rock to steel, natural to artificial, until we reached the vault doors, massive reinforced coalition symbols etched into the surface like scars. Ren hacked the panel. It opened slow, like a tomb. And inside. No guards, no alarms, just silence, and him, standing in the center of the room, the prototype, looking just like before. Like us. He smiled. Welcome home. He stood there like he owned the air we breathed. Same frame, same build. Human down to the skin. Short-cut hair, dark eyes, no scars, no imperfections. The kind of face you could trust if you weren't paying attention. The kind of face that was designed to look like nothing. He didn't flinch when the door opened. Didn't raise a weapon. Didn't blink. Just smiled. Welcome home. I raised my rifle. He didn't move. Behind me, Ren shifted her stance. Ridley moved to flank, silent, expression unreadable. The 3 of us formed a triangle, our weapons all trained on his chest. He still didn't move. "You're not going to shoot," he said, calm, smooth, like he was reading from a script. I didn't answer. He nodded slowly. "Of course, that would be too human." "Say that again," Ridley growled, stepping forward. "I dare you." The prototype glanced at him, amused. Still addicted to challenge? Still so predictable. Then his eyes came back to mine. "But you, Lieutenant Merrick, you're the one I wanted to see again." I didn't lower the rifle. He raised a hand slowly, not in surrender, just gesturing, like he was painting the space between us with words. Do you know what the first thing I ever felt was? Not fear, not anger, not hunger. He tapped the center of his chest. Curiosity. He walked slowly toward the center of the chamber. No sudden movements, just pacing. You're fascinating, you and your kind, so fragile, so broken, and yet so violently persistent. Every time you should have given up, you fought harder. I glanced at Ridley. His jaw tightened, but he didn't shoot, not yet. We studied you for years, broke your people open, watched them beg, watched them scream. But we didn't understand what kept you standing. Even when you had nothing left, turned back to me. And then I saw it. When you left me on the station, when you watched me through the glass, I remembered. I didn't speak, but I remembered every second. It wasn't victory you carried, it was pain, and you wore it like armor. He stepped forward again. I raised the rifle higher. Stop. He obeyed, hands loose at his sides. Ridley's voice was low. You're not here to talk. No, the prototype said. I'm here to understand. Because I want to know how the machine becomes a man. Ren spoke for the first time. You can't. That made him smile again. A little sad this time. No, but I can come close. And then, suddenly, he dropped to his knees. Not fast. Not dramatic, just surrendering. We didn't move. He looked up at me. You think I'm the enemy. You think I came here to destroy you. You did, I said coldly. No, I came here because I want out. The room went still. What the hell are you talking about? I asked. They made me to replace you. A perfect mimic. But I'm not like them. I felt too much. I learned too fast, and then I realized. He touched his head, then his chest. I couldn't shut it off. Your species infected me. Ridley snorted. You expect us to believe you're having a goddamn identity crisis? I expect you to kill me, the prototype said. But first, you need to understand what's coming. Now we were listening. I wasn't the first. I wasn't even the best. I was the control, the failed experiment. They sent me to Earth because they knew I couldn't be trusted. Ren narrowed her eyes. Then why let you live? Because they wanted to watch what happens when a mirror cracks. He stood again, slowly, carefully. This time we didn't stop him. The others, the real infiltrators, they're not like me. They don't think. They don't wonder. They just follow protocols. How many? Ridley asked. Enough. Where? Everywhere. My grip tightened on the rifle. The prototype looked at me again. You think this is still a war you can fight with guns, but it's not. This is cultural extinction. They're not going to bomb your cities. They're going to rewrite what it means to be human. I stepped forward. And what do you want from us? To die, he said simply. By your hand. So that you'll finally believe me. And then he dropped something. A data core. Slick. Black, still humming. Ridley snatched it, scanned it. Encrypted Coalition Bioschematic Library. Full list of active units, names, faces. Real ones, hybrids, sleeper agents, infiltrators. All of them. Ren swore under her breath. He's telling the truth. I looked at the prototype. He just stood there, calm, waiting. Do it, he said. End me before they can retrieve me. But something in his eyes and something too real gave me pause. Was this a trap, or was this something else? Ridley raised his pistol, aimed, but didn't fire. Not yet. He looked at me. Your call. I stared at the prototype. His face, his posture, his voice, everything about him was artificial. But the guilt in his eyes, that was earned. And so I asked the only question that mattered. What's your name? He blinked, then hesitated. I don't have one. You do now. I lowered the rifle. Your name is Ghost. He didn't smile, didn't cry, just nodded. Like he'd been waiting his whole life to be given permission to exist. Ridley holstered his weapon. Ren sighed. This is insane. Yeah, I said, but so is war. We brought Ghost back with us. Ren still hated the idea. Ridley didn't like it either, but we weren't playing by the same rules anymore. The enemy was already inside. We couldn't beat them from outside. We had to fight them in their own shadow. And for that, We needed someone who knew how they thought, someone they wouldn't see coming, a ghost in the machine. As the Genesis protocol lifted off, leaving Sigma-3 in flames behind us, I stood beside Ghost on the forward deck. He stared out the viewport, in silence, and then he spoke, low, like he wasn't sure he should. "You shouldn't trust me." "I don't," I replied, "but I trust what you hate." He looked at me, confused. "You hate what they made you?" He nodded. "Good," I said, "because so do I." Ghost didn't sleep. He didn't eat, didn't blink for too long, didn't fidget. He just existed in that unnatural stillness that made everyone else itch when he was in the room. You could feel it in the silence, like your instincts were screaming that something was off. But you couldn't explain why. Ridley hated him. Wren wanted him dead. The rest of the Genesis protocol. Crew avoided him like radiation. Me, I watched, because I needed to understand one thing: whether this thing we'd brought on board was a weapon or a warning. 2 days after Sigma-3, we received an encrypted ping. It wasn't from Earth Command. They were still blacked out, or gone, we didn't know which. This was from Outpost Kappa 9, a subterranean resistance node under what used to be Nevada. Old mining network, converted into a fallback communications relay when the Coalition started compromising surface satellites. The message was short: human survivors, scattered cells, some compromised, request assistance, high-value target, located, we need extraction. That was all, no names, no ranks, no time to ask who they were. But Ghost, standing behind me at the time, silent as ever, said only one thing: "They have one of ours." I turned to him. "A hybrid," he nodded. "A prime unit, older model, less advanced than me but more dangerous, less curious." Wren leaned in, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "And what's it doing in a resistance bunker?" "Studying them. Maybe sabotaging them. But if they've detected it, they're ahead of the curve. That alone is worth protecting." Ridley didn't like it, but he didn't argue. We prepped for descent. Outpost Kappa 9 was buried under a mile of rock and metal. To reach it, we had to land 5 miles out and move on foot through dried-up ravines and long-abandoned rail lines. The Genesis protocol couldn't risk a low orbit, not without alerting Coalition surveillance nets that were crawling across North American skies. Wren scouted ahead. Ridley and I followed. Ghost lagged. Not because he was tired, because he was cautious. "They'll feel me," he warned, "even if they don't know what I am yet." And sure enough, when we reached the blast-sealed access door to Kappa 9, the welcome wasn't friendly. The turrets locked onto him instantly. "Identify," came the voice through static. "This is Lieutenant Merrick, Earth Tactical, Authorization. Code 47 Delta Alpha. We're here to assist. That thing behind you isn't human," I didn't argue. "He's not," I said, "but he brought us here." Long pause. Then the doors opened, just enough for us to slip inside. The bunker smelled like metal and adrenaline. It was lit by dirty halogens, dim emergency strips running along the walls, and the low hum of machines doing their best to keep what was left of humanity alive. There were maybe 20 people inside, 10 of them armed, 5 of them injured, 2 barely standing, and one woman in her late 30s, lean frame, tight eyes, who walked straight up to me and said, "Which one of you is dumb enough to bring a hybrid into my house?" I didn't flinch. That'd be me. She stared at me for a long second, then shifted her gaze to Ghost. "He breathes." "Bleeds?" "Yes. And if I shoot him?" "He bleeds harder. Then maybe kills half the room." Her eyebrow lifted slightly. Then she said, "Fair enough," and walked away. That was our introduction. Her name was Commander Erin Hall, former Earth Army, dishonorably discharged 5 years ago for extreme field behavior, which in the current timeline made her ideal leadership material. She gave us the tour, if you could call it that. Cramped corridors. Power held together by duct tape and grit. A communications relay built from a fusion of Earth tech and stolen Coalition scraps. Nothing looked like it should work. Everything worked anyway. "Necessity makes better engineers than any university," she muttered, tapping a relay with the back of her boot. Then she took us to the holding cell. That's where we met it, the other hybrid. It was strapped to a reinforced chair, body twitching occasionally like it was trying to reboot. Its face was calm, empty, too perfect. And when it looked at Ghost, something flickered in its eyes. Recognition, then hatred. Ghost took a single step toward the cell, head tilted. Unit 9X Theta, primary infiltration model, decommissioned after failing cognitive cohesion, the E. Thing inside the chair hissed, literally, like something mechanical grinding behind its tongue. Commander Hall watched them both, arms folded. You want to explain why it tried to detonate our core when we caught it snooping around our medical wing? Ghost didn't look away from the thing. It was trying to activate dormant neural tags in your wounded, turn your soldiers into ticking bombs. She swore. I turned to her. You haven't scanned your wounded yet? She hesitated. I didn't have time to doubt my own people. That silence. That was betrayal settling in. We ran a full scan of the medbay, found 3 sleepers. Human bodies, infected with neural parasites the size of a fingernail, harmless until activated by external pulse. Hall's face changed when she saw the data. Not fear, not anger, rage. Not the kind you can scream through. The kind that hardens in your stomach and makes your decisions for you. She ordered the sleepers spaced, her own people. Didn't even flinch when they begged. Because once you know the virus has learned to look like home. Mercy dies. That night we sat in the command chamber, planning the next step. Ghost stood in the corner, silent. Ridley reviewed the coalition infiltrator list. It was worse than we thought. There were over 4,000 confirmed hybrid units active across Earth's military, civilian, and scientific structures, at least 700 embedded in infrastructure, critical to global survival, food, water, medicine. We hadn't lost yet, but we were bleeding out. Ren sat across from me, staring into a cracked screen that showed the Pacific. Half the ocean routes were offline. We're not just fighting them anymore, she said. I nodded. We're fighting the people who think they need them. That was the real war. Ghost approached me later, alone. He waited until the corridor was empty. Then he asked softly, if I had been activated on the station instead of breaking, would you have killed me? I looked him in the eye. Yes. He nodded. Good. Then maybe there's still a chance. A chance for what? For your species to stay yours. When we left Kappa 9 the next morning, we weren't just carrying intel. We were carrying the map to a new battlefield, not one of territory, but of identity. The Coalition didn't want our land. They wanted our image. They wanted to replace us in a way we'd never see, until the day we woke up and realized we were the minority in our own skin. But now we had names. Now we had faces. Now we had fire, and we had Ghost, the first of theirs who chose us. We didn't sleep, not because of the mission ahead, but because once you know the enemy wears your face, dreams become another battleground. By dawn, we were moving again. Commander Hall had given us everything we needed. Full access to Outpost. Kappa 9's intelligence logs, underground travel routes, and a direct line to her scattered resistance cells. But the most important gift? A target. Nexus Point 12, located beneath Central Command East, once the core of Earth's defense grid. Now it was a diplomatic research center, under the control of Earth Accord Partnerships, an organization that sounded like a peacekeeping committee, but had Coalition fingerprints all over it. It was where the first sleeper programs were authorized, where hybrid prototypes were tested in human command simulations, and where the code was written that allowed them to walk into Earth's governments like they'd been born there. Ridley pulled up the data feeds on the ride out. 4 high-level officials were confirmed hybrid. 9 were flagged as conditioned sympathizers, human collaborators programmed or broken to serve, and there were at least 50 unverified personnel in the structure, whose files had been scrubbed entirely. This isn't just an enemy base, Ren muttered. It's the heart of their silent coup. I nodded. Then we tear it out. Ghost said nothing. He hadn't spoken in hours, but he watched the screen like he was trying to memorize every corridor from memory. His hands twitched occasionally, like he was fighting something deeper inside. I watched that carefully, because no matter what he claimed, he was still a weapon made by the other side. We approached Nexus Point 12 under full blackout. No lights, no engines. No comms. The Genesis protocol dropped us 2 clicks out, masked by storm cover from a collapsed weather system the Coalition had never fixed. Maybe on purpose. Ridley, Wren, Ghost and I made the infiltration team. No support. No backup. If we failed, Earth would never even hear the echo. We entered through a collapsed subway terminal, an old rail line that had once connected urban centers before the war turned everything into quarantine zones and checkpoints. The tunnels stank of stale water and scorched circuits. Rats were long gone. Something worse had taken their place. The deeper we went, the quieter it got. At one point, Ghost stopped mid-step and held up his hand. We froze. He pointed forward, toward a section of tunnel that looked untouched, perfectly clean, too clean. Wren moved to scan and then stopped. "There's no dust," she whispered. Ridley narrowed his eyes. "They've been through here recently." Ghost crouched, touched. "The floor." "No, they live here." I aimed my rifle forward. "Light it." Wren tossed a flare. The moment it hit the floor, shadows peeled back, and we saw them, figures embedded into the wall. Not behind it, inside it. Skin stretched over metal, their bodies grafted into cables, into steel eyes open, watching, not dead, just waiting. Ghost stepped closer, not afraid. Half melds. Early experiments, they failed to stabilize, but the Coalition found another use for them. "Which is," he turned to us, "they're listening." Ridley raised his rifle and started shooting. We didn't stop until every wall-buried face was a hole in the concrete. We reached the security breach point at 400 hours, a backdoor into Nexus Point 12's understructure. Once a service hatch, now sealed behind 3 meters of welded composite. Wren planted the charges. Ghost looked at the wall before we blew it. "Once we go in, they'll know." Ridley stepped beside him. "Good." The explosion was controlled, just enough to open the breach without collapsing the tunnel. We entered through smoke and ruin, and walked straight into the future they were building. The lower levels of Nexus Point 12 weren't made for humans anymore. Gone were the fluorescent lights, the clean walkways, the artificial plants that used to sell the illusion of peace. What stood in its place was biology fused with infrastructure, walls lined with pulsing organic cables, floors that shifted when you stepped too hard, lights that dimmed when you spoke, like the entire structure was listening. Ghost took the lead. He moved without hesitation, guiding us through corridors only a Coalition-born mind could decode. We passed what looked like barracks, but they weren't housing soldiers. They were housing shells, hybrid blanks, dozens of them, hung from hooks, their skin still growing, their eyes closed. "They grow the bodies here," Ghost explained. "Custom designed, each one based on someone who used to exist." Ridley's voice dropped. "So they can insert them without resistance." Ghost nodded. "Even families won't know." I looked around. I saw a face on one of the shells. It looked like my older brother. He'd died 6 years ago, or so I thought. I raised my rifle and put a bullet through it. "Burn it all," I said. The central hub was guarded, heavily, not by humans, but by second-gen hybrids, fully armed, fully conscious. They were faster than anything we'd fought before. No hesitation, no breathing patterns to read, no emotional tells. They moved like algorithms. But so did we. Wren laid suppression fire while Ridley flanked. I drew their attention with open bursts, dodging fire between cover points. And Ghost didn't fire a single shot. He walked into them, and the moment they recognized him, they hesitated. That was enough. He grabbed the first by the neck and crushed its throat. The others turned too late. We wiped them clean. No words. No hesitation. Because hesitation was how you die in a war like this. Inside the hub, we found the control system, a massive biotechnical core, not a computer in the way we knew it. It was a brain, massive, pulsing, wired into every piece of Nexus Point 12 and connected to Coalition satellite chains across the globe. And in the middle of it, a woman, or what used to be one. Her body was suspended in fluid, her arms wired to the walls, her mind split into streams of data. Her eyes flickered open when we entered. "You're too late," she said. Ghost stepped forward. "You're the architect." She smiled faintly. "You always were the disappointment." He didn't answer, just walked up to the console and inserted the spike, a virus we'd brought from Sigma 3, a cognitive weapon designed to shut down hybrid integration networks for 60 seconds. 60. That's all we needed. Ghost turned to us. "You need to destroy the uplink, the biological relay. It's behind her." I nodded. Ren and Ridley moved fast. They planted charges. The woman didn't scream. She just looked at Ghost and whispered, "You could have been perfect." And Ghost replied, "So could you." Then he stepped back, and we blew it. The explosion tore the core open, sent fire through the walls, and severed every hybrid currently linked to Nexus Point 12's data net. We watched as the shell bodies began to sag, their structure failing, their mimicked faces deforming. Whatever control they had, whatever plan was in motion, had just been gutted. Ridley keyed the comm. "This is Genesis Strike Team. Nexus 12 neutralized. Repeat, system compromised and terminated." The line crackled, and then for the first time in over a week, Earth Command answered. "Received, Strike Team. Full confirmation. Extraction orders inbound. You've just bought us time." We looked at each other, tired, burned, bleeding, but alive, and the war had just turned. We didn't get a parade. We didn't get medals, speeches, or even names broadcast over Earth's patched-together comnet. What we got was a cold steel deck, 3 body bags, and a message from Earth Command that started with, "You bought us 6 hours." Not 6 days, not a week. 6 hours. That was the best humanity had bought itself by detonating Nexus Point 12, the largest infiltration relay the Coalition had ever constructed. In that time, the hybrid link went dark. Their coordination dropped. Cells disconnected. Even the atmospheric cloaks that had shielded their orbital landers began to fail. For 6 hours, they were blind. But then they started adapting. They always adapted. Ghost called it the shadow recoil. When one system fails, he told me, they retract. They pull into deeper systems, ones not even the other hybrids know exist. We weren't just cutting heads off the snake anymore. We were slicing open the body and discovering it had no organs, just more teeth. We left the ruins of Nexus 12 in silence. Ren hadn't spoken since the firefight in the control room. One of the hybrids had nearly taken her leg off with a sonic blade. She'd fought through it like nothing happened, wrapped it, walked, killed 3 more. But now she sat with her back to the hull of the dropship, head tilted back, eyes unfocused. "I lost someone here," she finally said. I turned, she wasn't looking at me. Just at the scorched skyline above. "My brother, last year. He worked in this facility. I thought he'd defected. Left us." She paused, swallowed hard. "They replaced him." My stomach clenched. I didn't speak. What could I say? Then she added, "I shot him 2 hours ago. Earth Command called us back to Fort Terminus, what was left of their deep command outpost built under the Greenland ice. It was freezing, cramped, and powered by 2 nuclear reactors that groaned every time the lights flickered on. But it was secure. For now. General Stroud met us in person. The man looked 20 years older than he did in his last broadcast. His eyes were bloodshot. Half his hair was gone, his handshake was limp, but his voice still held gravel. "You destroyed the main relay," he said to Ridley. "You crippled their infiltration channels." "We stalled them," Ridley corrected. "We haven't stopped them." Stroud nodded. Then he looked at Ghost, long silent, and I could see it in his expression. He wanted to kill him. "That thing shouldn't be alive." Ghost didn't react. I stepped between them. "He's the reason we found Nexus. He's the reason we made it out. He's also a ticking bomb. Then we'll be the ones to take the blast if he goes off." Stroud studied me, then looked past me to Ghost. "You understand why I want you dead?" Ghost met his gaze, calm, empty. "Because I remind you what your species let happen." Stroud didn't reply. He just turned and walked away. Later that night, Ghost found me on the upper deck. He stood beside me in the freezing wind, both of us looking down into the ice chasm where Terminus's generators hummed far below. "They're right," he said. I didn't answer. "I'm a liability." "You're more than that," he looked at me. "That's what scares you." I exhaled, hands tightening on the railing. "You're not scared of what they made you," I said. "You're scared of what we're turning you into." He didn't deny it. "The more I feel, the more I want to survive." "And the more—" "You want to survive," I said slowly. "The more human you become." "Exactly." He stepped back, turned toward the storm winds beyond the platform. "But the more human I become, the more I understand that survival isn't enough." The next mission didn't come from Earth Command. It came from a hijacked transmission in the old Martian dialect, one that hadn't been spoken in 20 years. A resistance cell in South Africa, Echo Base 7, had uncovered a coalition sanctuary embedded inside a terraforming tower, disguised as a climate initiative. It was pumping atmospheric distortions into the jet stream, seeding air with microscopic neural drones, breathable infiltration. If the process reached full scale, it wouldn't matter who was human and who wasn't. Everyone would think like them. Echo. Base 7 had one last beacon and then silence. They were either dead or worse. Earth Command refused to authorize a strike, said it was too exposed, too risky, too late. Ridley stood in the briefing room and said only one thing: "We're going anyway." We hit the tower under cover of a continent-wide dust storm, the kind of mess the Coalition used to their advantage. Except this time, it worked for us. Ghost led us through the perimeter. The tower wasn't guarded in the conventional sense. No soldiers, no turrets. Instead, it was quiet, the kind of quiet that made you feel like the whole place had already breathed you in and was just waiting for you to take one more step. Inside the lobby, there were no bodies, just people, standing, still, dozens of them, eyes open. "Not blinking, not moving," Ridley whispered. "Are they real?" Ghost stepped forward. "They're real. They're gone." He raised his hand and pressed 2 fingers against a woman's temple. Her head twitched once, then she collapsed. I caught her before she hit the ground. She wasn't dead, just empty, Ghost explained. "They're all networked, living transmitters, broadcasting the collective frequency." "A hive mind?" Wren asked. "No," he said. "Something worse. A consensus. We found the server core in the top of the tower, a bio-neural transmitter the size of a small city block, running on stolen human consciousness. Every person they'd ever captured was inside that signal, not dead, running the system. Their thoughts, their fears, their memories. Ghost stared at the core for a long time. Then he turned to me. "I can go in." "What?" "I can link. For a short time I'll find the control point." Wren shook her head. "That's suicide." Ghost looked at her. "That's identity." I hesitated, then gave the nod. Ghost walked to the interface, linked, and screamed. The moment he connected, the tower shook. Lights flickered. Walls pulsed. Every standing human in the lobby below began convulsing. And then they stopped. All of them. The signal dropped. Ghost collapsed to his knees, blood leaking from his nose, his ears. I caught him. "Did it work?" I asked. He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw terror in his eyes. "They know we're not just fighting. They know we're winning." He passed out before I could ask what that meant. But I didn't need to ask, because outside, for the first time in days, the sky was clear. Ghost didn't wake for 2 days. The medical team at Fort Terminus tried everything: neural stabilization, bioelectrical resets, even cryoflush therapy. Nothing worked. His vitals were steady, but something inside his mind was locked, like a system that had crashed and decided not to reboot. We didn't know if it was damage or evolution. Wren refused to go near him. "I don't trust that thing." "To stay down," she said, her leg still bandaged from the last fight. Ridley didn't say much either, but I could see it in his eyes every time he looked through the glass. He was wondering if we'd made a mistake bringing Ghost this far, and I was wondering what would happen if he never woke up at all, because the worst thing about Ghost wasn't that he might betray us, it was that he might leave us alone with what he'd started. The atmospheric tower hadn't just been a transmitter, it had been a receiver, a global one. The neural broadcast Ghost had linked into was more than just coordination. It was a template stream, a system uploading human consciousness blueprints into a lattice so advanced, even coalition scientists didn't fully understand what it was doing. We found a recovered message buried inside its backup logs, a coalition commander's voice. Calm, dispassionate. Phase 3 begins when they believe they've won. The moment they destroy the tower, the system activates the recovery failsafe. No signal needed, just the last breath of hope. What it meant, none of us knew. Not yet. But the fear crawling down my spine told me it wasn't about military tactics. It was about identity theft on a species-wide level. Ghost woke up screaming. Not loud, but real. The kind of scream that made the walls shake. 3 medics tried to restrain him. One of them ended up with a dislocated arm. By the time I got to the medbay, Ghost was sitting upright, eyes bloodshot, sweat pouring off his skin like he'd just run 100 miles through fire. He didn't recognize me at first. Then he blinked twice and said, "They're already here." Who? Not infiltrators. Replacements. He tried to stand. His legs buckled. I caught him, helped him to the bench. "What did you see?" Ghost stared straight ahead, his voice distant. "A city underground, not on Earth, not on any map, a vault." "What kind of vault?" "Where they're keeping copies." Ridley didn't believe him. Not at first. "Copies," he said. "In the war room." "As in clones?" "No," Ghost replied. "Impressions. Digital echoes of every human the signal touched. Reconstructed. Simulated. Then built." He brought up a schematic. Something he'd burned into his memory while linked to the tower's core. It showed a facility. Massive. Buried somewhere beneath the Indian Ocean trench system. Deep. Shielded. Off-grid. Ghost called it the Hollow. "It's not just where they store the data, it's where they breathe life into it." Ridley leaned forward, jaw clenched. "Then we nuke it." Ghost looked at him. "You can't. The structure is protected by deep-sea pressure fields. Any impact large enough to destroy it from the outside would crack the entire tectonic plate." "So what's the play?" I asked. Ghost didn't blink. "You go inside." Earth Command was split. Half the generals refused to believe the Hollow existed. The other half believed it and wanted to bury the entire ocean. But Ren? Ren believed it the moment she saw the recon packet. "They built a womb," she said. "That's what this is. A technological womb. And they're waiting for the signal to birth whatever's inside. Then we kill the fetus before it becomes the parent," I said. Ridley agreed. The Genesis protocol was refitted in record time for sub-ocean deployment. We stripped it down, reinforced the hull, and attached pressure pods and coil drills, meant for crust-level mining. We weren't just going underwater. We were going into a place Earth wasn't meant to reach. We dropped into the Indian Ocean at 0200 hours. No light, no comms, no ceremony. The Genesis moved like a ghost through black water. Ghost stood at the forward observation glass, eyes locked on the depth counter. He didn't look afraid. He looked like he was coming home. At 17,000 meters, we made contact with the outer shell of the Hollow. It wasn't metal. It wasn't stone. It was living. Covered in bioreactive plating, the Hollow pulsed with heartbeat rhythms that matched no known species, but mirrored a pattern we'd seen in Ghost's early scans, a pattern that looked very much like ours. They weren't building hybrids anymore. They were gestating humanity 2.0. The entrance wasn't locked. That was the first red flag. The second? No resistance, no alarms, just a long corridor that opened like a throat as our boarding pod latched on. The walls inside were warm, wet. They breathed. Ren nearly turned around. "This place is wrong." Ghost placed his hand on the wall. It vibrated, slightly. "It's listening." "Good," Ridley said. "Let's tell it what we came for." The central chamber was almost too quiet. a cathedral built from the inside of something that didn't understand worship. We walked through rows of incubation columns, each filled with something vaguely human, twitching, not quite awake. Faces we recognized. Faces we'd buried. My mother was in one of them. She died when I was 15, but there she was, floating in biogel, her mouth twitching like she was trying to remember a prayer. Ren grabbed my arm. "Don't look too long." "That's how they—" "Get in!" Ghost moved ahead faster now. He was being pulled by something, by someone. He stopped in front of the last pod. Inside was him, but older, taller, his eyes blank. "This was the original," he said. "I was the derivative, the copy with curiosity. This is what they really wanted." Ridley planted a charge, Ren did too, and I joined them. No speeches, no hesitation. We burned every pod in the room, and for once, they didn't fight back, because the Hollow had one more card to play. The floor split beneath us. We fell, not far, but hard, separated, scattered, alone. I landed in a chamber full of mirrors. But they weren't reflections. They were versions of me. Some were younger, some older, some bleeding, some smiling, all wrong. One of them stepped forward. "You can't kill what you don't understand." I shot it in the head. It smiled as it dropped. I found Ren, 2 corridors, over, surrounded by versions of her dead brother, all begging her to save them. She set the room on fire. Ridley was already standing in a pile of corpses when we caught up. He didn't say a word, just nodded once. But Ghost? He was gone. We found him in the Hollow's final chamber, kneeling before a pulsing sphere that looked like a planet's heart. He turned to us slowly. His face wasn't the same anymore. "They tried to overwrite me," he said, "tried to pull me back into the core, but I'm not theirs anymore." He held up a detonator. "This is the only way. You destroy the womb from the inside." Ren grabbed his arm. "There has to be another way." "There's not," I said, because I saw it in his eyes. He was the last firewall, and he'd chosen us. Ghost smiled, the first real smile I'd ever seen on him. "Tell them we were never copies." Then he pressed the trigger, and the Hollow screamed. The Genesis protocol barely made it out. The oceans swallowed the Hollow like it had never existed. Earth Command confirmed the neural signals dropped planet-wide. The hybrid units, silent, some self-terminated, others simply collapsed. For the first time in a century, Earth saw real stars. And Ghost? Ghost died the way he lived, between what he was made to be and what he chose to become. They declared victory 2 days later. Earth Command called it the collapse of the Hollow Front. They broadcast the message across every surviving comms satellite in orbit. The infiltration is over. The last reproduction site has been terminated. Humanity holds the line. On paper, we won, in truth. We had no idea what we'd lost to win. Ghost's death didn't get a speech. There was no funeral, no moment of silence, because officially he didn't exist. He'd never worn a uniform. He never had a serial number. There was no dog tag to return. No hometown to write a letter to. And even if there had been, who would we send it to? I stood alone at the edge of the Genesis Protocol's deployment hangar, watching the black ocean shimmer under the orbital lights as we circled low Earth. Ren joined me quietly. She held something in her hand. "Found it in Ghost's quarters," she said. It was a piece of folded paper, strange considering Ghost didn't write anything. Didn't eat, didn't drink. He lived like a statue, but this was human. On the paper were just 2 words I chose, no name, no goodbye, just that. I stared at it for a long time, then tucked it into my vest. We never spoke of it again. Ridley changed after the Hollow, not on the surface. He was still sharp, still precise, still issuing orders like a man with 1,000 regrets and no time to feel them. But something behind his eyes dulled, like he'd lost the last reason he had to believe in what we were doing. I caught him alone in the weapons bay one night, staring at a railgun's targeting matrix. "You think it's really over?" I asked. He didn't look at me. "Over?" he repeated. Then he shook his head slowly. "They never wanted to win." That made me pause. What? They didn't want to beat us. They wanted to transform us. He turned finally. "Tell me, Merrick, what are we now? What did we become to survive them? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure. Earth started rebuilding, sort of. Power grids flickered back online. Governments reappeared, smaller, meaner, more paranoid. Local militias turned into provisional peacekeeping forces. Borders were redrawn overnight, and all the old flags came out of storage. They wanted order, structure, something they could wrap around this chaos and call it peace. But there was a problem no one wanted to talk about. The hybrids didn't all die. Some had hidden, some had gone completely rogue. Worse still, some had integrated too well to ever root out. We started calling them shadows, not because they attacked, because they didn't. They just watched, sat in bars, joined reconstruction teams, filed taxes, smiled in public, and waited. Earth Command started the Reckoning Initiative 6 weeks after the Hollow fell. It was a global sweep. Every region, every sector, every city, mandatory blood screenings, behavioral audits, background scrubs. If you flagged too many anomalies, you disappeared. No questions, no appeals. Ren was drafted into one of the first audit teams. She came back different, didn't talk much, just kept working, kept moving. Eventually, I asked her how many people she'd flagged. She didn't answer, but the tremble in her jaw said enough. I visited Ghost's chamber once, the one they built for him on the Genesis protocol after Nexus 12 VSRs. It was small, sterile, bare walls, no personal effects, except for one small object in the corner, a mirror cracked down the center. I remembered something Ghost once said before Sigma 3. Every time I look in the mirror, I wonder if I'll still be there. I touched the crack, and for the first time I realized he wasn't afraid of the Coalition. He was afraid of disappearing into the thing they built, of becoming a weapon so efficient it forgot how to want anything else. A month later, we received a signal. Not Coalition, not Earth Command. It was encrypted, deeply, buried in the old lunar beacon network. An Earth relay no one had touched since the Martian insurrection. It came through in fragments, images, voices, then a file. The image was grainy, but I knew the face immediately. Ghost, alive, or something wearing his skin. He was in a dark facility, surrounded by hybrid figures, but he wasn't restrained. He wasn't a prisoner. He was standing in front of them, talking, leading. The file ended before we could trace it. But that image, it changed everything. Ridley slammed the door behind him when he saw it. "That's not him," he snapped. "You don't know that." He stepped into my face, teeth clenched. "I watched him die, Merrick. You did too. Then explain it." He turned away, hands flexing like he wanted to punch the wall. He was infected, pulled into that damn system. Maybe it left something behind. Ren watched from the corner, quiet, pale. Then she finally said it. "If Ghost's alive, maybe." He wasn't ours to begin with. They gave us 72 hours. To investigate, verify, contain. Earth Command wanted confirmation of defection. If it was him, they'd authorize a planet-side strike, no trial, no questions. Because one hybrid leading an army of unknowns? That was enough to reignite the war 10 times worse than before. We traced the signal to an abandoned terraforming site off the west coast of Greenland, an archipelago called Winter's Cradle, used briefly as a Coalition processing station before the Hollow was discovered. It had since gone dark, too dark. We deployed by dropship under a false registration. Ren, Ridley, me. 3. Ghosts chasing the 4th. We landed on cracked ice and moved across skeletal steel towers, long since consumed by weather and blood. Then we found the entrance, a hatch beneath a dead glacier, still warm, still breathing. The moment we stepped inside, I felt it, that hum like the walls were listening. Again, Ren moved first, Ridley followed, then me. The corridor lights flickered on, one by one, and standing at the end. Ghost exactly as he'd looked before the Hollow. No aging, no change, not a scar on him. He didn't raise his hands, didn't speak, he just waited, and finally said, "You came back." None of us spoke first. We just stood there, 3 worn soldiers, our boots soaked in melting ice water, staring down the barrel of a moment none of us had prepared for. Ghost didn't look surprised to see us. He didn't smile, didn't flinch, didn't raise a weapon. He just stood there in that narrow corridor, bathed in sterile white light that hummed like breath caught between panic and calm. Ren raised her rifle. "Say something," she growled, voice low, tense. "Say anything that proves it's you." Ghost tilted his head slightly, studied her, then said, "You still sleep with one eye open. You breathe with rhythm, but your finger doesn't match the pulse when you aim. You're about to shoot me and you won't miss. That's who you are." Ren froze. Her trigger finger twitched. Then she slowly lowered the rifle, just an inch, still not safe, but not ready to kill him yet. I stepped forward. "Ghost, we saw you die." He looked at me, eyes the same, voice the same. But there was something different, deeper, like his movements had become lighter, as if gravity no longer fully applied to him. "I did die. Just not the way you think." Ridley finally spoke. "We burned the hollow." "You did," Ghost nodded. "And it burned everything, including the last part of me that was still theirs." "Then what are you now?" Ghost paused, then answered without hesitation. "Free." The room beyond the corridor was wide, circular, clean, no bodies, no weapons. Just consoles powered by something I didn't recognize. Not Coalition, not Earth. Ghost walked ahead of us, not checking to see if we followed. We did, because curiosity is a disease we've never cured. He stopped near the center of the room, then turned. "You came because you thought I was compromised." "You are compromised," Ren said. "Then why didn't you shoot me?" "Because I don't shoot until the war is over," she replied coldly, "and this one's still crawling." Ghost gave a half smile. "Fair." Then he raised his hand slowly and pressed it against the console. The floor shifted, metal split, and from beneath a figure rose. Not a hybrid, not a human, something else, wrapped in armor that shimmered like water, breathing, but not from lungs. Ridley raised his weapon instantly. "What the hell is that?" Ghost answered. "The future, or what they wanted it to be." I stepped closer, cautiously. The thing inside the armor didn't move, but its shape was familiar. Same proportions, same jawline. It looked like me. I felt my stomach drop. "What is this, Ghost?" He looked right at me. "It's you. Your genetic imprint, your thought cadence, your pain markers. I pulled them from the hollow before it fell. They made dozens like you, thousands. But I kept one." Ren moved toward the pod, face pale. "This is why you brought us here." He nodded. "Because you have to see what they were planning to do. The hollow wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The next step was to seed these copies across the stars. Not just Earth, but everywhere." Ridley stepped up, furious. "Now, you brought us out here to see this freak show. You're trying to make us feel sorry for you?" "No," Ghost said softly. "I brought you here so you'd understand that we're not done." That's when the walls began to pulse. Red, then white, then dark. A low vibration shuddered through the floor. Outside, the ice cracked. "Status," I barked. "Is this an ambush?" "No," Ghost said. "It's a signal." He turned to the console. "They've been watching from far beyond the systems, you know. They let Earth burn because it was just a test." "Test for what?" Ren asked. "To see if you'd destroy yourselves before they ever needed to intervene. And you passed." The console blinked alive. A new feed appeared on the screen. Footage, real time. From orbit. Ridley stepped forward and went still. 3 ships, enormous. Not Coalition design, not human. We'd never seen them before. They hung above Earth like swords waiting for gravity to decide who they should fall on. And then, a voice not through speakers in our heads. "The prototype has survived. Integration complete. Phase 4 ready." Ghost flinched. Pain flashed across his face. Real, raw. He clutched his temple, staggered back. "I shut you out," he whispered. "You don't get to call me back." The voice continued. "You carried the seed. You were never meant to be free. But now the seed has sprouted." The armored figure, the one that looked like me, shuddered, twitching, waking. I raised my rifle. "Ghost, "What the hell did you do?" He looked at me with eyes full of regret. "I gave them your name, so I could keep mine." I froze. "What?" "I had to choose a model to hide the failsafe, a human template that would make them believe it was theirs. I used yours." Ridley grabbed him. "So they're here for him?" Ghost shook his head. "They're here for me, but they'll take all of you if I don't end this." He turned to the console and typed something. The pod housing the armored copy hissed, then collapsed, melting in on itself like a punctured lung. Ghost exhaled, then looked at us. "They wanted to use your pain, your trauma, everything that made you human, turn it into a weapon. But you fought back, and I learned. And now—" He turned, arms slightly raised, as the ceiling above us opened, revealing sky for the first time in hours. "I'm going to show them why they should be afraid of what I've become." Outside, the ships began to descend. The air warped, wind tore across the ice, sirens screamed from the Genesis protocol in orbit. Ridley grabbed my shoulder. "We need to go, now." I looked at Ghost. "Come with us." He shook his head. "If I leave, they'll follow. If I stay..." He looked up and smiled. "They burn." We barely made it back to the dropship. As we lifted off, the platform beneath Vinter's cradle shattered. A light, not a blast, not a weapon, but a pulse of pure data, ripped through the sky. The ships above staggered, not destroyed, but halted. Frozen. Ghosts. Last signal was short. I gave them a choice. They didn't take it. Then silence. From orbit, Vinter's cradle vanished, not exploded, erased, like it had never existed. No trace, no signal, no ghost. Earth Command doesn't know what happened. We told them fragments, gave them enough truth to keep our side prepared, but not enough to start another war with enemies we can't reach. As far as they know, the Hollow was the end, but we know better. Ren sees them in her dreams now. Not enemies. Reflections. Copies of people she's killed, people she's saved. People. She used to be. Ridley doesn't talk much anymore. He trains the next generation, the ones who never knew the sky before it was claimed by betrayal. He tells them how to shoot, how to think, how to survive, but not how to feel. That was always the part Ghost tried to learn. Me, I keep watch. Every day I check the stars, looking for ships that aren't there yet, looking for signals we aren't supposed to hear. And sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I hear him, just faintly, a whisper in the static. I chose. The war officially ended 1 year after the destruction of Vinter's cradle. No more hybrids, no more transmissions, no more unexplained disappearances. The skies stayed quiet. Earth's surface grew back slowly, like scar tissue reforming over old wounds. But everyone knew the silence wasn't peace. It was just recovery and preparation. The broadcasts called it the era of reclamation. Rebuilding cities, restoring power, repopulating outposts. But what we were really doing was learning to look at each other again and wonder, even now, if the person across from us was truly human. That's the wound we couldn't close. Not with politics, not with science. It stayed open in the back of the mind. It bled quietly. Every handshake felt a little too long. Every eye contact lingered half a second too much. We weren't afraid of death anymore. We were afraid of replacement. Ren left the Genesis protocol 6 months after the Vinter event. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't leave a note. One day she was there. The next she wasn't. I heard she took a small unit north, into the ruins of what used to be Quebec. There were still whispers of hybrid sleepers nesting in the hills. Quiet types. Not violent. Just observing. She went to end them, or join them. I'll never know. But I hope she found peace, or at least silence. Ridley stayed longer. He turned the Genesis protocol into a training ground, a floating barracks that moved from sector to sector, teaching the new recruits what war really looked like, not the glory, not the banners, the cost. He showed them footage, made them walk the ruins of Nexus 12, let them hear the screams of civilians who'd unknowingly slept beside copies of their families for months before it all fell apart. He didn't smile much, didn't drink anymore either, but he carried something. I never saw before purpose. Maybe that's what leadership really looks like when the fight is over. You carry the ghosts no one else wants to remember. As for me, I went home, if you can call it that. My childhood house was gone, vaporized during one of the early bombardments. My parents had been dead for years, no siblings, no extended family, so I settled in what used to be Colorado, now called Grid 12, a reconstruction zone halfway between law and lawlessness. I worked security for the border walls, kept my head down, kept my weapon close, watched, because I wasn't ready to stop. Not really. Then one night I got the call, encrypted, untraceable, old code, Genesis Black, the kind only a handful of people knew, and all of them were supposed to be dead or dust. I opened the file. It contained a single voice log. 1. Sentence familiar. They never left Merrick. They just changed the question. And attached to the log one was a set of coordinates deep in the Pacific, past the hollow site, farther than any patrol dared go now. I knew who sent it. I didn't even need to say the name. I packed my gear that night and left Grid 12 behind. I chartered a stealth sub off the books. No escort, no beacons, no crew. I programmed the nav path myself, loaded the AI with old ghost encryption layers, and left everything else behind. No one tried to stop me. People knew me well enough by now to understand that when I left, I wasn't coming back the same, or at all. We reached the site 3 days later, a place the sea had reclaimed. No structures, no ruins, just depth and darkness. But the sensors picked up a pulse, not mechanical, not biological, cognitive. The water vibrated in patterns, repeating signals. Morse, but faster. A language meant for someone like me. It said, "Come down." So I did. I dropped in a pressure shell and let gravity take me. There was no light, no pressure change, just silence so complete it made my teeth ache. And then, without warning, structure. A void cut out of the seabed. Massive, unnatural, invisible, to sonar. I docked manually, stepped out into the abyss, rifle slung but ready. What I saw made me forget how to breathe. Ghost was alive, or at least something shaped like him was. He stood in the center of a vast black chamber. No walls, just water and reflections. Behind him, dozens, maybe hundreds, of others, all standing still. Some looked like me. Some looked like people I once knew, all watching, none blinking. Ghost stepped forward, same face, same calm. But his skin shimmered now. Not chrome, not synthetic, like he'd become the bridge between what he was and what he chose to be. "Welcome back, Merrick." I raised my weapon, didn't aim it, not yet. "Tell me this isn't what I think it is." He nodded once. "It is, but it's also not." He turned, motioned behind him. "These aren't invaders. They're survivors." I frowned. "Of what?" "Of programming, of design, of orders. They were built to be you, but they saw what you did instead." He looked at me again. "They chose to." My throat went dry. "You're building something." "Not an army," he said. "A firewall." He gestured at the others. "They remember everything. The Hollow, Nexus, Vinter. They carry all the data, all the pain, and none of the impulse. No hunger, no control instincts, just choice." I shook my head slowly. "You expect me to believe you turned a species of infiltrators into philosophers?" Ghost didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "No, I turned them into mirrors." "So, when your kind looks up again and sees the next invasion coming, they'll know who they are, because they'll see who they aren't." I stood there for a long time, gun lowered. Mind racing. He didn't ask me to stay, didn't ask me to trust him. He just showed me what he was trying to become. And what we might become too. And then he said, "You're still afraid." "Of what?" I asked. He paused. "Of not knowing where the line is anymore." I didn't answer. I didn't have to, because we both knew. It's not about the enemy outside anymore. It's about the one you become when you fight too long. Left Ghost in the dark, climbed back to the surface, watched the stars, and thought about everything we'd lost, everything we'd kept, and everything that never belonged to us in the first place. This war began with a trap, a treaty written in lies and sealed with blood. But it ended with something else, a machine that learned to want, a soldier who learned to listen, a species that remembered how to change without losing itself. Humanity didn't win because we were stronger. We won because, when the enemy came wearing our skin, we still chose to be more than what they expected, and when they come again, because they will, we'll be ready. Not just with guns, but with ghosts, with memory, and with the fury of a species that refuses to forget what it cost us to remain ourselves, even when we were outnumbered. Even when peace was a trap, we walked in with our guns ready, and we left with our souls intact.